Alrighty, so now we are in the next section of chapter 2. So this is part 2 of chapter 2, anatomical directions. Now, this is information that is discussed throughout the book. So section 2.2 is not on the exam, but it is helpful to review for this course. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time doing that here, just for those who are less familiar with some of these anatomical terms. Now, these are some of the primary anatomical terms that we use to actually refer to the positioning of the brain or the body. So now anterior, this basically is toward the face or front, okay? So anything that's anterior, like the most anterior portion is your nose. Posterior is towards the back, it's the very back of your head towards the occipital lobe here in the back. There's just that sort of little bump that you feel. And superior is above, or towards the top, towards dorsal, which is also the top. Inferior is below. You can kind of infer some of these directional spaces from the other ways the words that are used. And inferior is also known as ventral, sort of for the bottom, dorsal, the top, and then lateral, which is the sides here, and then medial, which is going towards the middle. So your head is in sort of the very medial section of your trunk, and then your shoulders and sort of your arms and hands and everything are the extending out laterally. All right, so now here you can see that a little bit more with some examples. So here you have for animals, sort of, this is the rostral, sort of again, sort of forward, also can be meaning sort of the anterior, as you would see here. For animals, there's a slightly different, we have the dorsal sort of about here in terms of the back. Ventral is the stomach, and rostral is towards the beak, and caudal is towards the tail. And then you can see here for a person, dorsal on top, anterior towards the front, ventral towards the bottom, and then your posterior is easier to remember because it's also referred to as your behind. And then for dogs, you can also see that you have this dorsal element here of the back and sort of this ventral space right here. So whatever way you are positioning yourself, then sort of what's dorsal and ventral can shift a little bit. But in general, towards the front of you is anterior, towards the back of you is posterior, the top is dorsal, and then towards the bottom is ventral. And then the more you move in, then it's medial, and the more you move out, then it's lateral. Again, here, this is with the brain structure, so you can see everything working together. The anterior portion with the nose, the back, then here you have the lateral heading outward, the medial heading inward, and then you've got the dorsal and sort of this ventral portion, right here. So these are the standard anatomical terms for referring to parts of the brain, the forward, so you can have the interior portion of the frontal lobe. That would be the most sort of front facing portion. You can have the lateral frontal lobe, which would be the sort of outside here, the medial frontal lobe, which would basically be this inside right here. So this is the most medial, this is the lateral. Now I'm seeing this just a little bit more. I'm going to move so you guys can stop blocking anything. Now, these are again spaces for anatomical viewing of the brain. Again, this is helpful terms. These are not things that are going to be on the exam. You're not going to be tested on whether you remember what is rostral versus anterior versus posterior. But these are really helpful things for actually navigating the content, because these are anatomical terms. And if you don't know some of the terms, then it can just be a little bit harder to follow everything. So we'll have this section here. Now, also, you'll see this in terms of lots of imaging techniques that we're trying to basically learn more about what's going on inside the brain. And so these are this is basically a coronal section of the brain. So it's like this space right here. And so this is what you would see in this coronal section halfway through. So depending upon where it is, but here's the lobes right here. Here's the temporal lobes on the side. So this could either be the frontal lobe or the parietal lobe, but it looks like, honestly, it's forward enough that it's basically right on some of the juncture pieces, but it's more frontal. And then this is the horizontal section, sort of cutting off the top. And you can see this is a dorsal view. And then here you can, right here is your ventricles, and you can also see them here in this space. They're different colors based upon the contrast. Because in this one, all of the gray matter is dark. And in this one, all of the white matter, the white matter is dark and the gray matter is gray. And in this one here, the white matter, which is the axons and stuff like that, is white, and then you have the gray matter being gray. So this just depends upon the contrast being used. And then this is the sagittal section, so it's right down the middle. And this is where you would kind of see here, you've got your, sort of the side view of the brain. You've got your frontal lobe, your occipital lobe. This is your parietal up here. Here's your cerebellum. Here's aspects of your, you have your ventricles right here. And then you head down into your brainstem, and there are your eyes. So these are just so you know what these sort of cuts are, and being familiar with them. And you can also see them illustrated here in this section as well. Then just looking more into some of the cerebral geography, so you can try to remember what lobes of the brain are where. Okay, so and this is helpful. Like, again, you're not going to necessarily be tested on it, but you'll want to know where some of the regions are, sort of with respect to each other, because it affects how they'll communicate and things like that. And so here's your frontal lobes, and then this would be your parietal lobes and your occipital lobes from the very top. Your temporal lobes, they're underneath, they're in this ventral section, so you can't see them from the top, but you can see them really well from the bottom. Here's your frontal lobes, your temporal lobes right here, frontal. You can even see that little space right there where the optic nerves and sort of optic chiasm would be. Then you have the temporal lobe, and this here is a very beautiful cerebellum. And then this is in aspects of the brainstem right here. And then you've got your side view where you can see all of the lobes, frontal, parietal. Here you can see this fissure that sort of demarcates the temporal lobe right here. And it looks from here, can't tell what some of their central sulci is. Maybe this one should be right about here. And then this is the inside. So you can see the very inside of this piece here. This is cortex as well. Again, you've got some of your ventricle space, your cerebellum. So you can see all of these on here. Now, this is the parts that I wanted to show you that's really sort of helpful, but you can also do your own little, brain check here with the hand. Maybe this way is a little bit easier. My hand is kind of, big, but you've got your front sort of knuckles, are your fingers are your frontal lobe. Then the parietal lobe is your top knuckles right here. So these are your frontal knuckles. These are going to be your top. And I think this is like cutting off part of this here. And then this is your temporal lobe right here, this sort of thumb that's coming out. And then your wrist is more your occipital lobe. So this is just a really sort of helpful way of remembering where everything is. And basically ending with some of the pieces again, sort of again, dorsal, ventral, and sort of how the positioning can sort of shift, that this is also ventral and dorsal. And then when you shift up to the brain, then it's dorsal and ventral. Whereas for the animal, that is in this position all the time, then it's just dorsal and ventral. And that was this quick section on anatomical directions. And in the next one, we'll be continuing with chapter 2. And it would be section 2.4.